Welcome to the Inside the Sales Playbook show, where on each and every episode, we dive into the actual sales processes, plays, and strategies working for sales teams today. No high-level overview, we get into the actual weeds of what some of the fastest growing and most successful sales teams are doing today to drive revenue and grow their businesses. And we've got two sponsors. Inside the Sales Playbook is sponsored by SalesKit. SalesKit takes the guesswork out of scaling your sales knowledge all on one great platform. No longer do you have to have your sales knowledge spread out on Google Drives and on Dropbox and on various other files and folders and saved locally on your own computer. SalesKit makes it easier than ever for your team to access the sales knowledge that actually works. You can sign up for a free trial at getsaleskit.com. And buy my book, Raise Your Standards, the definitive guide to building seven-figure sales. You can get a copy of this book to help grow your sales, whether you're an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a sales contributor at getsaleskit.com/book. Let's get into the show. And I'm your host, Mark Evans, and today I'm here with Mr. Tim Whitmire. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Mark.
Awesome. Well, Tim is the founder at the CXN Advisory. And in addition to his founder's title at CXN, he's also an objective and key results, that's OKR consultant, co-founder of F3, which is a national network which includes almost 2,000, probably up to close to 2,500 free peer-led workouts for men. And he's held various executive positions at some really fast-growing startups. And many of those have gone on to either be acquired or to raise funding. And he's been a great consultant and advisor to many of those companies as well. Tim's also a Harvard alum and an avid rower. So Tim, we're excited to have you on, but how about we give the listeners and the viewers here a little bit of context? How about you explain your consultancy, CXN, and how do you help businesses achieve their mission?
Yeah, so Mark, CXN, it stands for the term coxswain, and
Okay.
the coxswain is not me usually, but I'll explain how it became me. But in a crew boat, in a rowing situation, the coxswain is usually the 110, 120 pound guy or girl who sits in the front of the boat and doesn't actually pull on any of the oars, but steers the boat and kind of serves as a coach within the boat.
They're the ones with like the megaphones, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly. So you got to have be light on the scale, but a loud voice. So, the coxswain really, for me, represents, that, like I said, kind of that coach in a boat. Yeah. And you've got your head coach who's off there in the launch, but you've got somebody who's inside the boat who's not actually pulling on the oars, but is really trying to build the team and help the crew do what we call set the boat. And that's really get everybody in the boat, whether it's 4 or 8 rowers, in sync, putting their oars in the water at the same time, pulling at the same rate, all the stuff that's required to make a cruise shell balance and not tip one way or the other. Because when they tip, then the oars fall in the water, then you lose momentum. And if you can keep the boat balanced and everybody's working together, then the boat moves really well through the water. And so the organizing analogy of the work I do is I'm going to come in and be a coxswain for your business in some ways. And that might be an executive coaching relationship. That might be implementing a goal setting strategy like OKRs. But I'm going to try to help you set the boat and kind of build alignment among your team and get that boat moving smoothly through the water. I would venture to guess that you've been in situations where the team is maybe not in complete alignment and people are pulling in slightly different directions. And our goal is to come in and get everybody pulling the same and rowing in the same direction.
I feel like I've been on teams where we're either rowing in opposite directions or some person's actually on a paddle boat while I'm in a rowboat and we left one person back on shore. So I could see how important that position and that set of outside eyes really can be on a business, especially for entrepreneurs, especially for sales leaders. Tim, how did you get to that point of saying, hey, I want to launch my career into this and be that coxswain for businesses and founders and teams?
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I sort of laugh at the idea that I'd become a coxswain because I'm actually, I weigh more than 200 pounds. When I rowed, I was very much the guy who you needed on the oar. I would not have been useful in the coxswain seat. Too much too much dead weight. But I've had a really kind of random career in some ways. That I was a newspaper reporter, mainly with the Associated Press, for about 15 years. Went on, worked in business development for a couple of investment banks. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so worked for a couple of middle market boutique banks. Got to know kind of finance and the deal making world.
Yeah.
And then from there went on and worked at a couple of startups and have been involved fairly heavily in kind of the venture growth stage ecosystem. And then, as you alluded to earlier, the sort of parallel track that I started down in kind of 2009, 2010 was a friend of mine and I co-founded this network of free workout groups for men called F3. And that started here in Charlotte with one workout on New Year's Day, 2011, and has now grown internationally. And so we've got F3 workouts starting from that one that have spread to California and Illinois and Texas and up to New England. And so that process of figuring out how to grow that entity, particularly given that the workouts are free, so didn't really have a revenue source there, really gave me a lot of insight into issues like leadership development, goal setting, effective kind of team organization. So that really sort of steered me into the direction. And I got to a point a couple of years ago where I was being asked by so many people to consult on different projects or serve in a coaching role in some way. I was like, I probably ought to just hang out a shingle and came up with my organizing idea around it, which is the coxswain role. And so that's how I serve now.
That's awesome. What do you think, Tim, makes a good coach or consultant or advisor? Especially for growing companies. What do you think makes a really good coach or advisor to growing companies?
It's really, and this goes to kind of your focus on sales teams. There's a lot of similarities to what makes an effective salesperson, right? And I've been a salesperson in some limited roles in my career, but as any salesperson knows, ultimately we're all selling something, right? In all our roles, and whether it's personal relationships or whatever. And at the end of the day, the coaching relationship, the consulting relationship, the sales relationship is just that. It is relational. And if I can make a connection with you, if you and I have had a conversation, and we've had a few of these over the months that we've known each other, where you and I really make a connection and you feel like I really understand you and I get what you're going through, then I've got an opening to maybe share some things with you that maybe make a difference for you. So the most gratifying moment of my entire career of doing this was the first time I ever had a client quote something back to me that I had said to him like 6 months earlier. And he was like, there's this thing, if you have this, then this turn. I was like, yeah, you got that from me. And you know what? That's awesome.
That sounds good.
Clearly sunk in. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got to imagine it's nice when something goes from theory to them actually absorbing it, maybe teaching other people, because I imagine you're not the only person that they explain that to, and they're teaching it to their staff, and who knows, that kind of ripple effect will go. Yeah,
exactly. That it ripples out from there, and you're like, wow, that's I made a difference to them. That's cool.
That is cool. Well, before you talked a little bit about OKRs,
sure.
Could you explain that to the viewers and to the audience here, and how would a fast-growing team, maybe one that's looking to either raise money or really blow up, right? How would they use OKRs in their company?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to talk about that. So the high level background to OKRs is this was a system that originally was developed. If you read John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters, which came out probably 2018, so a couple of years ago now, he pulled it out of Intel back in the 1970s. And it was this organizing principle that Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, used to kind of focus the team on goals. And the idea is we're going to set top level objectives for a quarter or a year, or even you can pick a different length of time in actual application. But we're going to have some goals for the quarter. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to really focus on what are the underlying metrics or data or key results, as they're called, that we think will get us to the goal. So a lot of times I will say to my clients, project yourself forward 3 months in time from now. If we've achieved this goal that you've told me you want to achieve, what does the world look like on that date? Mm-hmm. Right? What is the optimal outcome there? And looking back, what are the things that you could have measured along the way that would have told you that you were making progress toward the goal? So, so the idea being, you're going to set this up, and you're going to say, we're going to go forward in the next 3 months with these 4 or 5 objectives, and underlying them are 3 to 5 key results, behaviors, outcomes that I'm willing to track and make myself accountable for, that I think will lead to this objective being realized. And so it's not one of the things I say to people. People are really into OKRs right now. A lot of companies in Silicon Valley run them. They're very popular in the tech world. There's nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, this is a different packaging of fundamental truths that we've known. Somebody's probably written a book on leadership secrets of the early Christian church, right? I mean, you can go back to the Bible, and all of this is there. That's even where the line "nothing new under the sun" comes from. So, so this is the current packaging of it. I'm not personally particularly wedded to OKRs. They work well as a framework, but I was talking to a guy this morning. He's running EOS's system, which is entrepreneur
the traction,
traction and all that, and same basic ideas, right? So that the real focus is to come in my practice, come in and find a mode of working with you, say, if you're my client, and say, what are the 3 to 5 things this quarter, and particularly at the startup stage, that you are going to privilege with your time that are not the daily brush fires. Mark, you probably got up this morning, looked at your smartphone, and there are 25 emails that came in overnight that you need to deal with, right? And it used to be you sat down at your desk at 9 a.m. and they're all there. Now you get up at 6:30 and they're all sitting right there. But those are the daily brush fires you've got to put out, right? But my goal for you is for you to have 3 to 5 things you're working on this quarter that are not designed to be the daily brush fires, but that are designed to let you and Sales Kit meet the future before the future is the bus that runs you over. And so they often tend to be sort of aspirational. These are the things that we know we need to do, but we'll get distracted by the daily grind if we don't privilege them with our time and our effort. So.
Yeah, I really like that. So it seems like one of the symptoms that someone would come to you if they're having would be that they're constantly putting out brush fires, and maybe they spending more time working inside the business than working on the business. What are some other symptoms that founders or CEOs or leaders will have commonly that they're experiencing a pain or a problem in which they're like, all right, I've got to make a phone call to Tim, or when they have a conversation with you, they're like, aha, I'm having that exact issue?
Yeah. So look, I mean, the shiny object thing is endemic. You come up with a good idea. You've got a good platform. Maybe you've got some traction in the marketplace. We saw this with F3 very early on. All of a sudden, people are coming at you from every direction of like, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? So I'll use the F3 example, because you get a bunch of guys in a community all of a sudden working out together, and they're all losing weight, and they're feeling good, and they're enjoying social connections with each other.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, guys want to do something with that energy. They want to go out and change the world. And we had guys coming to us very early on in Charlotte. We want to go build a habitat house, or we want to start a tutoring program here or there. And ultimately, what we decided was, and this was my partner, Dave Redding, who had a military background, and he was like, what we need is a mission statement. We need to have a really clear mission statement. And so our mission statement for F3 was, we plant, grow, and serve small workout groups for men for the invigoration of male community leadership. So and that's burned into my brain now. And that plant, grow, and serve thing became a filter for us of, what is our core business? Our core business is not staging a 5K race that F3 guys can participate in. If a 5K race organizer comes to us and says, hey, we really like F3 to be involved in this, there might be a partnership there. There might be some benefit to it. But no, our job is not running 5K races. Our job is not printing T-shirts with the F3 logo on them. In fact, we're going to side source that to one of our F3 guys who wants to start a sportswear brand. He's going to be our official gear provider, but we're not in the gear business. We're in the plant workouts business. And so I see that a lot with, I've got one client in particular in mind right now, who really fast growing business, getting a ton of traction in the marketplace. And he's got all this optionality right now, of what to do with the business, what kind of add-ons he wants to pursue, and so forth. And so a lot of times my sitting down with him is saying, all right, what's your core objective? What's your core mission? Let's stay the course on that. Let's not get distracted by this. Or if it's really important, is it so important and such a valuable opportunity to us that we're willing to pivot our mission to go pursue it? And that's got to be a constant thought for people.
Yeah, a couple things on that I really like. So number one, most people cannot repeat the mission statement of something that they were involved with. I mean, even today, right? Many companies, many employees, right? It's this like arbitrary thing that they put up in the lobby of like, we promise to take really good care of our, customers or something. Just something that gets nobody fired up. But I could tell that the mission statement for F3 has really resonated with you and was obviously really ingrained. And I like how you then use that not just as a placard to put up in the lobby,
right?
Really as a mechanism and a vehicle to really train your thinking and to rebuff the opportunities. I think it was Steve Jobs that said, I'm more proud of the things that we turned down or said no to than the opportunities that we said yes to. I think that's really great. And I think the last I'm sorry.
No, I was just getting that point about the mission statement. My running joke about that is that pretty much every corporate mission statement can be boiled down to we are all things to all people.
Yes.
And ultimately that's profoundly ineffective. And any company, any organization that I'm working with, even if this is not the corporate mission statement that you're going to put on the plaque in the lobby, even if it's not for public consumption, I want you and your team to be profoundly, this is who we are and this is what we do. And it's okay that we're not everything else that everyone else necessarily wants us to be. I mean, we worked with a company that was in computer related sales once, and like we really kind of ground in on them about, okay, what's the mission? What's the mission? And finally one of the guys raised his hand and said, sell more shit. We're like, there you go. That's the mission statement. You can bleep that out if you need to.
I won't. That's all right. We'll put a warning on it or something. No, it should be good. Yeah, I think that's really good, right? Because for some reason, why do you think it is, Tim, that in this land of opportunity that we have, right? Thousands and millions of potential prospects and different opportunities there. Why do we feel like there's a limited pie, right? That there's a limited number of opportunities or leads or prospects out there. Well, I mean, can you give us any insight or light into why, founders and entrepreneurs can have such a scarcity mindset when it comes to their leads or comes to their prospects?
Look, I mean, that's a deep-grained evolutionary behavior going back millennia, right?
Oh, it's easy as that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, but I mean, you got to prepare for winter, right?
Yes.
I mean, you've got to, and I find this myself in my practice is I'll have people come to me and I've gone down this path wrongly in the past. I'll have somebody come to me with a really good opportunity, and it's like that's guaranteed income for 6 months or whatever, and I'm gonna and ultimately like, and I thinking in particular one time I did this, and he really wanted me to do it, and he was going to pay me good money to do it, and really wanted my help, and my heart was not in what he wanted me to kind of create for him, and it did not end up going well. And you have to have that ability. I worked for a guy at one of the startups I was at who basically his approach to sales was people would want our product to be, basically a Swiss Army knife. You ever seen, I think they have it on Amazon. It's like the $500 Swiss Army knife, and it's like this thick, and it's got, I mean, you could never even put the notion of it being a pocket knife is just laughable, right? But people would come to him and they'd be like, oh, can your product do this? Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do that. We can program it, disregarding whether it made any sense, whether it would make sense for other customers. And you can't do that. You can't do that in sales. You have to know who you are and what your niche is and be able to sort of turn people aside and say, you know what, if that's what you're looking for, this may not be the best fit for you. We sent our kids to a private Episcopal school for kindergarten through 8th grade, and the founding head of school was really good. It was in downtown Charlotte. This was 20 years ago when downtown people were still nervous about sending their kids downtown before all the millennials moved in and gentrified it. And Smokey used to do these meet the new parents coming in, all the prospective kindergarten parents who would come in, and inevitably, some worried mom would raise her hand and say, well, do you have security guards to walk the kids to the library? Or, what do you do about, if there are homeless people near the campus? And he would just sit there and go, you know what, if that's what you're worried about, this might not be the right school for you.
Wow.
And I think we all kind of need to take that same approach to how we think about our organizations. If that's where you're coming from, this might not be the right fit for you.
I really love it, because I imagine the parent that raised their hand and said that probably did not deter them from wanting to go to that school. If anything, like most evolutionary biology has led us to, right? Now you're telling me I can't potentially have it, or it's not a fit for me. Now I want it more. Like, I'm going to have more children to sign up for this school.
Well, and look, even if that worried mom, or in some cases it was often a worried dad, even if they're turned off by it and they walk away from it, the fact is you just did that in front of a core group of people, many of whom get what you're trying to do and are like, oh, I want that even more because this guy gets it. So the whole notion that of being all things to all people, I'm always with my clients, I want to really just absolutely zero in on who are you selling to, and what are you selling to, and how deep an understanding can you get of those people and what their needs are, because and ultimately we referred to this earlier, that's the relational part of it. That is, I understand you, I know your needs, and I'm here to satisfy those needs in some way.
I love that. Yeah, and that's where true connection, it seems like, really happens. And I can attest to that from our conversations as well. I really like that. Tim, let's get into some practical advice here. We're recording this. It's late September 2020. We're going into the fourth quarter here. What's some practical advice you have for the founder, the entrepreneur, the sales leader, perhaps, that, man, they need to have a really strong Q4. These next 90 days have to go well, because 2020 has been just an absolute, cluster. What advice do you have for them over the next 90 days to help them sleep at night?
Yeah. So look, I mean, for a lot of people, this year has been, for a lot of people, Q2, to your point, was, a wipeout in some way or another. Now, look, I mean, for some people, it's been great, right? I mean, for the Zoom people, hey, things are going great. Grocery store owners, things are awesome. COVID was ultimately, or the ultimate example of something that I've been talking to clients about for a couple of years, which is contingency, which, go back to my, shit happens, stuff happens. We can all do the best job possible to plan for all the possible contingencies. And as humans, we tend to be very, I'm going to do A, and then B, and then C, and then D, and then I'll get to E and I'll be done. And the reality is, most of us who are higher functioning get to B, hit a roadblock, circle around to B2, maybe come back to A3, go up to C4, and end up at E, right? That's, it's this and that. And COVID is the ultimate example of that, right? So everything goes out the window, and you've got to kind of recreate your company. I know you made a lot of choices on the fly based on our conversations about how you were going to get your business off the ground. And that adaptability and the ability to so coming into Q4, now you've got a somewhat more stable situation. We don't know what the winter is going to look like. We don't know what the virus is going to look like over the winter. Make hay while the sun shines, but be preparing for, and this is strategic planning season for anybody who's on a year-end fiscal cycle, certainly, of like, how do I think about 2021? And more to the point, and this is something I've seen with a lot of really successful organizations just through the pandemic, how do I need to authentically adapt my organization to the current situation? What are the changes that I need to make, or I can make, that will make me better suited to thrive in the current atmosphere? And then also, really, what are the things that I can't change? I have a lot of conversations these days with leaders about getting people back into the office, right?
Yeah.
Remote work has become kind of a tension point for a lot of industries, where they feel like, it's okay. We're better off than we would have been 20 years ago. We can do a lot of this business, but ultimately, face-to-face interaction, whether with clients or internally among our people just around the water cooler, we've lost something that we can't replace without that. So how do I get some of that back? How do I get the people back into the office that I can get back without pushing too hard, without being, threatening safety? And so much of that comes back to, what we talked about earlier, is kind of ultimate mission, vision, values. How do I stay authentic to those things while adapting my business model, my way of doing business, to the current environment?
Yeah. I really like that. That's really good advice for someone, especially, as you're right? We're starting to think about, and you should be thinking about 2021 and putting that plan together for how you're going to tackle the market in this ever changing time. We've also got elections coming as well, which who knows where that's going to lead us to. So fun times ahead for sure.
Well, and that's where, so a lot of times if I come in and I'm doing an OKRs implementation for a business, we will take if I were starting right now, we would literally use the last quarter of 2020 as, hey, let's set up some sample OKRs. Let's throw some stuff against the wall, kind of track it for a quarter, see what sticks. And while we're doing that, and there's no harm, no foul of not hitting any goals or anything like that, we're going to be looking at that system. We're going to be adjusting that system and how we're tracking our OKRs, and we're going to be putting really careful thought in October and certainly in November about, okay, what are our top 3 to 5 strategic objectives at a corporate level for Q1? First of all, for all of 21, but then how do I dial those back to Q1, and how do I go into that first quarter with some really tight objectives, acknowledging that something may happen on January 2nd or February 4th where you got to go back to the drawing board, but we put our best effort of planning into it.
Yeah, I like that. So really using Q4 of 2020 as kind of almost a weather balloon or test balloon type of quarter where, hey, you're still focused probably on your main business, right? And your core deliverables of trying to bring revenue in and close the year out strong. But you're saying use this last quarter as a time to test some of maybe the assumptions that you have or some of the hypothesis that you have so that you're set up, ready to roll come January 1st of 2021.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'll point out that I really like about the OKR system is it forces you at the bottom level to really kind of get into data and science. You've got to come up with metrics that you think are the right levers to push to get to the achievement of this top level objective, right? So, if it's in sales, let's say we want to increase new customer signups by 15% in the quarter, and we identify, each salesperson we think needs to be averaging 35 outbound calls a day or something like, and from there, and, setting 3 meetings a week and, 1 final demo or whatever we think those metrics are. The whole, to me, we're all, and particularly sales orgs in general, tend to be awash in different metrics. We can measure all kinds of different things. We can track data really efficiently, but there's a lot of noise out there. And
tons.
The whole thing about OKRs is it gets a data-driven organization into a situation where you say, okay, I'm going to track, I think these are my key results. I'm going to pick these 3 out. But then if it turns out that those are not the 3 things to do, now you've discovered, okay, those are not the levers I need to be pushing. What other data sources, what other measurements, what other metrics do I need to be tracking? So it really, and the thing I love about them, and I'll shut up after this, but it's just at the bottom level, you're really trying to be data driven. You're trying to be disciplined about your data. But ultimately, what you're trying to dial it up to at the top level is objectives that everybody is aligned around and that people are really excited about. So at the top level, it's really almost an art of building a team, getting the crew rowing together, everybody in alignment, and a very kind of people-oriented thing so that, you're not, like you said earlier, it's not like one person's in a paddle boat and the other person's in a cruise shell. But so there's sort of this art level, but then there's this underlying science level too. And so that's sort of one of my favorite things about it.
So kind of to use your rowing analogy, right? The OKRs is really the time clock that you're racing against, right? And you have to know, all right, what's the time you did for this 1,000 meters? And that's really the judge that you're going against, or maybe your cadence or your tempo, whatever they use for rowing. That I don't know. Lean on you. But that's really up to, then that influences how fast we're going, what direction we're going, what speed we're going at, which helps. Who do we choose to get on that team?
Well, absolutely. So, I mean, just to sort of squeeze the analogy as hard as you possibly can, I mean, one of the key metrics when you're in a crew is strokes per minute. And you've got a guy sitting up in the stroke seat at the front of the boat who is responsible for setting that cadence. And it can go from 18 strokes a minute, which is pretty leisurely, on up to, Olympic cruise row at 40 strokes a minute. And all of that. And then all the metrics that fall out of that decision, including how much force people are putting on the oar, how quickly they're recovering on the sliding seat, and so forth, gets driven by that. And so, again, you might row at a certain cadence for an easy row, you might row at a different cadence, and races are basically structured around, we're going to come out rowing 36 strokes a minute, we're going to settle to 28 strokes a minute, and then we're going to come back up at the end of the race if it's a sprint. So it absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got your sort of underlying metrics, and then the ability to get at the macro level, can we get everybody aligned and pulling in that same direction?
Wow, I had no idea that even rowing was that much of a metrics-driven organization. I think that's awesome, and a lot founders, sales team leaders can really apply to their own teams. But I think, Tim, this is a great time. Let's transition to the final five. Tim, these are five quick fire questions that I'll ask you. I'll ask, you answer. Are you ready?
Let's go for it.
All right. So first question, what's a favorite sales-related movie that you have?
Glengarry Glen Ross, of course.
The classic, classic.
Always be closing.
Oh, so the coffee is for closers. All right. What's a favorite sales book of yours?
I really, I'll go to one that I read very recently, and it's, I think it's called The Art of Possibility. And it's less about being specific to sales and more about a lot of the relational stuff I've been talking about, more about approaching life from, and this would go for sales as well, from a perspective not of scarcity, but of abundance and possibility, like we were touching on earlier.
I really like that. Tim, what do you know now that you wish you would have known when you first got into sales and first into the business world all those years ago?
Everything. How to keep my mouth, how to keep my mouth shut, how to talk when I should, how to listen when I should, and how to talk when I should.
I like that. That's really good. Tim, what's one of your favorite purchases of 2020 that's been under $100?
Ooh, under $100. So my daughter's been home. She hasn't gotten to go to college on the schedule we thought, and she and I we used to go down to Starbucks for cold brewed coffee every afternoon. We got one a couple blocks from our house, and somebody, I think I gave her for her birthday giant mason jar where you can do your own cold brewed coffee at home. So we do that together now, and we have that every afternoon. So that's kind of our little ritual, and it's saving us all the Starbucks money as well. So.
That's awesome. I like that. Tim's Roast coming to a store near you, then Tim, a favorite follow on social media.
Oh boy. Let's see. I really, there's a writer for The Atlantic, a guy named Connor Friedersdorf, who I was a political science major in college. And so he's just really combines kind of smart, what I'd consider sort of libertarian flavored conservatism, and just really like following him on Twitter, and really interested by a lot of the conversations he sparks, particularly in the current political environment.
Yep, a lot of fodder there. Now, Tim, where can our listeners connect with you if they want to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at CXN Advisory, Charlie, X-Ray, Nancy, advisory.com. And my email address is tim@CXN Advisory, and always happy to field any inbound inquiries. Happy to jump on the phone and just meet people. I had a call with a guy this morning he's got his organization buttoned down so tightly, he has absolutely no need for any of my services, but I basically turned it into an hour-long interview of him so that I could pick up some stuff that might help my other clients. So always happy to have a conversation with folks.
That's awesome. And I can attest to that. And the amount of value you bring to all of those conversations is really awesome. Well, Tim, thanks so much for being on. Taking us inside the sales playbook. That's Tim Whitmire with CXN Advisory. Thanks, Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
You too.